50 Cent just dropped a documentary that doesn't whisper, it screams. Jay-Z and Diddy are in the crosshairs, and what it reveals about hip-hop's power structure, the internet is absolutely losing it. This isn't just celebrity drama. This is about control, silence, and who really runs the game. For decades, everyone thought they knew the story. Diddy was the party king. Jay-Z was the untouchable mogul. 50 Cent was just the loud guy throwing shots on Instagram. That was the surface. That was what they wanted you to see. But now, Curtis Jackson isn't just talking anymore. He's documenting. He's exposing. And the Netflix film he executive produced, The Reckoning, was only the beginning. This new project doesn't just revisit old beefs, it rewrites the entire blueprint of hip-hop power. From courtroom scandals to billion-dollar deals, from paternity wars to NFL contracts, the whole narrative is twisting. And once you see what 50's revealing, you can't unsee it. Let me break this down. 50 Cent's documentary doesn't just call out Diddy, it dismantles the myth that hip-hop's elite earned their thrones purely through talent. The film opens with archived footage, Diddy at the height of his empire, laughing at exclusive parties, shaking hands with corporate CEOs, controlling the room. Then it cuts to courtroom steps, to mugshots, to victim testimony. The fall was fast. The conviction was brutal. Trafficking, exploitation, crimes that shattered the image of the man who once defined hip-hop luxury. But here's where it gets even crazier. The documentary doesn't just stop at Diddy, it pivots hard to Jay-Z. And the question it asks is simple but devastating. How did he stay untouched? How did the man who stood next to Diddy at every major industry event, every gala, every power meeting, walk away without a single scratch? 50's film features insiders, former label executives, people who were there when deals were made behind closed doors, and they all say the same thing: the system protects its favorites. One anonymous source, a former A&R executive, speaks directly to the camera. His voice is steady, but his words cut deep. It wasn't about who was the best rapper. It was about who played the game. And Jay-Z, he mastered the game better than anyone. The film shows side-by-side timelines, Jay-Z's Grammy wins, his corporate partnerships, his transformation from street hustler to billionaire businessman. All of it happening while allegations swirled around people in his circle. All of it happening while other artists got blackballed, shelved, or silenced. Fans online turned into investigators after the trailer dropped. They started pulling up old interviews, old clips, old photos, comparing body language, analyzing who was standing next to who at what event, slowing down frames from award shows, zooming in on handshakes. And folks online swear they're seeing patterns, connections, a web of influence that goes deeper than anyone imagined. One TikTok breakdown went viral, showing how many artists signed to Jay-Z's Roc Nation faced mysterious contract disputes or fell off the radar entirely. Coincidence? The documentary suggests otherwise. TMZ just dropped a statement from Jay-Z's legal team. Flat denial. These allegations are baseless and rooted in conspiracy. But the timing? Suspicious, because the documentary doesn't rely on rumors. It uses court documents, legal filings, testimonies from people who were actually in the room. And when you layer that with the public's growing distrust of celebrity power structures, the optics are terrible. Think about it. Diddy was untouchable until he wasn't. Weinstein was untouchable until he wasn't. Cosby was untouchable until he wasn't. The pattern is clear. Power protects power until the truth becomes too loud to ignore. And the most chilling part? The documentary reveals how deeply connected Jay-Z and Diddy really were. Not just socially, not just professionally, but strategically. One segment focuses on the early 2000s, when both men were consolidating power. Diddy controlled Bad Boy, Jay-Z controlled Rockefeller, and according to insiders, they had an unspoken agreement: don't compete, dominate together. The film shows how they appeared at each other's events, promoted each other's brands, and quietly shut out rising talent that threatened their dominance. One former artist who requested anonymity describes it like this: "If you didn't play by their rules, you didn't play. It was that simple." Fans swear they've been saying this for years, but now with 50 backing it up with evidence, with interviews, with documents, it's no longer just internet speculation. It's a documented exposé, and the internet is buzzing hard. Because this isn't just about two rappers. This is about an entire system that rewards silence and punishes truth. And 50, he's breaking that silence, one frame at a time. Now let's get into the motive, because this is where everything starts clicking. Why would 50 Cent dedicate years of his life to exposing Jay-Z and Diddy? Some people think it's jealousy, some think it's revenge, but the documentary tells a different story. It's about survival. It's about speaking for the ones who couldn't. It's about making sure history remembers the truth, not the edited version. 50's rise wasn't smooth, it was violent, it was messy, it was real. In the late 90s, he was one of the hottest underground rappers in New York. Mixtapes were flying, streets were buzzing, labels were circling, and then silence. Nobody would sign him. Not Def Jam, not Bad Boy, not Rockefeller. Why? Because he refused to play the game. He refused to sign deals that gave away his masters. He refused to bow down to executives who wanted control. And according to the documentary, that decision made him a target. One segment focuses on the infamous blackballing. Former industry insiders describe how certain names were quietly added to a no-sign list. Artists who were too independent, too outspoken, too dangerous to the established order, and 50's name was on that list. He talks about it himself in archival interviews shown in the film. "I couldn't get a deal in New York. I had to go west. I had to go to Dre, because New York shut me out." That decision, that rejection, was the birth of his empire, but it also planted the seed of what we're watching now. 50 remembers, and he doesn't forgive. Meanwhile, Jay-Z's ascent is framed very differently. The documentary doesn't claim he wasn't talented, it claims he was strategic, ruthlessly strategic. The film shows how Jay-Z positioned himself as the face of New York hip-hop, while quietly distancing himself from anyone who could challenge that narrative. Former Rockefeller artists describe a culture of control, of image management, of loyalty tests. One artist says it like this: "If you didn't play by their rules, you didn't play. It was that simple." Fans swear they've been saying this for years, but now with 50 backing it up with evidence, with interviews, with documents, it's no longer just internet speculation. It's a documented exposé, and the internet is buzzing hard. Because this isn't just about two rappers. This is about an entire system that rewards silence and punishes truth. And 50, he's breaking that silence, one frame at a time. Now let's get into the motive, because this is where everything starts clicking. Why would 50 Cent dedicate years of his life to exposing Jay-Z and Diddy? Some people think it's jealousy, some think it's revenge, but the documentary tells a different story. It's about survival. It's about speaking for the ones who couldn't. It's about making sure history remembers the truth, not the edited version. 50's rise wasn't smooth, it was violent, it was messy, it was real. In the late 90s, he was one of the hottest underground rappers in New York. Mixtapes were flying, streets were buzzing, labels were circling, and then silence. Nobody would sign him. Not Def Jam, not Bad Boy, not Rockefeller. Why? Because he refused to play the game. He refused to sign deals that gave away his masters. He refused to bow down to executives who wanted control. And according to the documentary, that decision made him a target. One segment focuses on the infamous blackballing. Former industry insiders describe how certain names were quietly added to a no-sign list. Artists who were too independent, too outspoken, too dangerous to the established order, and 50's name was on that list. He talks about it himself in archival interviews shown in the film. "I couldn't get a deal in New York. I had to go west. I had to go to Dre, because New York shut me out." That decision, that rejection, was the birth of his empire, but it also planted the seed of what we're watching now. 50 remembers, and he doesn't forgive. Meanwhile, Jay-Z's ascent is framed very differently. The documentary doesn't claim he wasn't talented, it claims he was strategic, ruthlessly strategic. The film shows how Jay-Z positioned himself as the face of New York hip-hop while quietly distancing himself from anyone who could challenge that narrative. Former Rockefeller artists describe a culture of control, of image management, of loyalty tests. One artist says it like this: "If you didn't play by their rules, you didn't play. It was that simple." Fans swear they've been saying this for years, but now with 50 backing it up with evidence, with interviews, with documents, it's no longer just internet speculation. It's a documented exposé, and the internet is buzzing hard. Because this isn't just about two rappers. This is about an entire system that rewards silence and punishes truth. And 50, he's breaking that silence, one frame at a time.
Let's also talk about the competitive angle. 50 and Jay-Z have been compared for decades, both from New York, both hustlers turned rappers, both moguls. But their paths were opposites. Jay-Z played the game, 50 burned the board. Jay-Z built relationships, 50 built walls. And now, 50's using that outsider status as a weapon because he has nothing to lose. And Jay-Z, he has everything to lose. His legacy, his billionaire status, his untouchable image, and 50 knows it. The documentary is a calculated strike, not emotional, not reckless, strategic. 50 learned from the best, and now he's using their playbook against them. The section closes with one devastating line from 50 himself, spoken during an interview. "I don't do this for clout. I do this because somebody has to." And you feel the weight of that, because whether you believe every claim or not, one thing is undeniable. 50 Cent is forcing a conversation that the industry tried to bury, and that alone makes this documentary dangerous. But here's the part that really hits different. This isn't just about billionaires and beefs. It's about the people caught in the crossfire, the artists who never got their shot, the families who were torn apart, the victims who were silenced, and the documentary doesn't let you forget that. One of the most powerful segments focuses on Rymir Satterthwaite, the young man who's been claiming for over a decade that Jay-Z is his biological father. The footage is heartbreaking. Rymir's godmother, Lily Coley, appears on screen. Her face is tired. Her voice cracks. She's been fighting this legal battle for years. Bankrupt, exhausted, but still fighting. Because it's not about money, she says. It's about truth. It's about a child who deserves to know who his father is. And the system, she claims, has done everything in its power to stop that from happening. Court records flash across the screen, appeals denied, jurisdiction claims, delays, legal maneuvering that kept the case from ever reaching a conclusion. And through it all, Jay-Z never took a DNA test. The documentary doesn't claim guilt, but it asks the question that won't go away. If you're innocent, why not just take the test? Why fight it for over a decade? Why spend millions on legal teams to avoid something that would take 5 minutes? The implication hangs in the air like smoke, and viewers feel it. One comment from the trailer already has over 200,000 likes. If he's got nothing to hide, prove it. Simple. And that sentiment is spreading. Then there's the broader emotional toll. The film interviews former artists who were promised the world and got nothing. One woman describes signing with Roc Nation, being told she was the next big thing, and then watching her project get shelved indefinitely. No explanation, no release, just silence. She talks about the depression that followed, the financial ruin, the feeling of being used and discarded. And she's not alone. The documentary features multiple voices with similar stories, all pointing to the same conclusion. The system eats people, and the ones at the top, they walk away clean. There's also a segment on Diddy's victims, the ones who came forward during his trial, the ones who testified about abuse, manipulation, and fear. Their voices are haunting, and the documentary makes sure you hear them, because this isn't abstract. This isn't just industry politics. These are real people whose lives were destroyed. And for years, the machine protected the abuser. For years, the image mattered more than the truth. Until it didn't. Until 50 and others forced the world to look, to listen, to care. The narrator's voice cuts through the emotion with one final line. Power protects power until someone powerless refuses to stay silent. And you feel that deep, because the documentary isn't just exposing the powerful, it's honoring the powerless, the ones who spoke up when no one believed them, the ones who fought when the odds were impossible, the ones who deserve to be heard. And that's the emotional core of this entire project. Justice delayed isn't justice denied, not if someone keeps fighting. Now this is where things get even crazier, because the documentary doesn't just present the evidence once and move on. It circles back, it digs deeper, and the second wave of revelations even more damaging. This section focuses on Jay-Z's transformation, the rebranding, the shift from rapper to mogul to untouchable icon. And the film argues that transformation wasn't organic. It was engineered, deliberately, strategically. And the key to that transformation? Beyonce. The Beyonce contract theory is one of the most controversial segments in the entire documentary. Cultural commentators, music industry analysts, and former associates all weigh in, and the consensus is striking. Jay-Z's marriage to Beyonce wasn't just a romantic union, it was a business decision, a calculated move that fundamentally changed how the world saw him. Before Beyonce, Jay-Z was respected but polarizing. He had baggage, legal issues, cheating rumors, a reputation for being cold, calculated, and ruthless. After Beyonce, he became aspirational, inspirational, the embodiment of Black excellence and family values. The film shows the shift in real time. Grammy nominations skyrocket, corporate partnerships multiply, luxury brands that never touched hip-hop suddenly want Jay-Z as their ambassador. And the narrator asks the question that cuts to the core. Was it love or was it leverage? One industry insider puts it bluntly, Beyoncé's image was spotless, untouchable, and Jay-Z knew that. By linking himself to her, he inherited that untouchability. It wasn't just a marriage, it was a merger. The film even shows how Jay-Z's Grammy wins increased exponentially after their relationship went public, from 1 or 2 awards in the 90s to over 16 since marrying Beyoncé. Coincidence? The documentary doesn't think so. But it's not just about awards, it's about access. The film reveals how Jay-Z's marriage gave him entry into spaces that were previously closed: presidential fundraisers, tech billionaire summits, global economic forums. He wasn't just a rapper anymore, he was a power player, and Beyoncé was the key that unlocked those doors. Critics argue that this diminishes Beyoncé's own agency and success, but the documentary isn't attacking her. It's analyzing how image and influence work in tandem, how power couples aren't just romantic partnerships, they're brand empires. And the Carters built the most powerful brand in entertainment history. Then, the documentary pivots to the NFL deal, and this is where the backlash becomes undeniable. When Jay-Z partnered with the NFL to oversee entertainment and social justice initiatives, the reaction was split. Some saw it as progress, a seat at the table, a chance to change the system from within. But others saw it as betrayal, as selling out, as trading activism for access. And the film features voices from both sides. Dame Dash, Jay-Z's former business partner, appears in archival footage calling the deal a disgrace. We went from kneeling to entertaining. That's not the movement we fought for. The documentary contrasts the NFL's glitzy halftime shows curated by Jay-Z's Rock Nation with footage of Colin Kaepernick still unsigned and effectively blacklisted. The implication is clear. Jay-Z chose the bag over the cause. He chose power over principle. And whether that's fair or not, the optics are devastating. One commentator in the film says it perfectly. Representation without resistance isn't progress, it's performance. And that line hits hard because it reframes the entire conversation. It forces viewers to ask, what does it mean to be in the room if you're not changing what happens in the room? Online detectives took this segment and ran with it. Threads broke down every halftime show Jay-Z produced, every artist he selected, every decision he made, and the pattern they found: safe, commercial, non-threatening. No political statements, no Colin Kaepernick tributes, no kneeling, just entertainment, just spectacle. And fans started asking, was this the plan all along? Did the NFL bring Jay-Z in specifically to sanitize the activism, to make the protests palatable, to turn revolution into revenue? The documentary doesn't give a definitive answer, but it presents enough evidence to make you wonder, and that's the point. Then there's the broader emotional toll. The film interviews former artists who were promised the world and got nothing. One woman describes signing with Roc Nation, being told she was the next big thing, and then watching her project get shelved indefinitely. No explanation, no release, just silence. She talks about the depression that followed, the financial ruin, the feeling of being used and discarded. And she's not alone. The documentary features multiple voices with similar stories, all pointing to the same conclusion. The system eats people, and the ones at the top, they walk away clean. There's also a segment on Diddy's victims, the ones who came forward during his trial, the ones who testified about abuse, manipulation, and fear. Their voices are haunting, and the documentary makes sure you hear them, because this isn't abstract. This isn't just industry politics. These are real people whose lives were destroyed. And for years, the machine protected the abuser. For years, the image mattered more than the truth, until it didn't. Until 50 and others forced the world to look, to listen, to pair. The narrator's voice cuts through the emotion with one final line. Power protects power until someone powerless refuses to stay silent. And you feel that deep, because the documentary isn't just exposing the powerful, it's honoring the powerless. The ones who spoke up when no one believed them, the ones who fought when the odds were impossible, the ones who deserve to be heard. And that's the emotional core of this entire project. Justice delayed isn't just...
Let's keep it real. This whole situation gets even crazier when you realize how many side stories tie into the main narrative. The documentary doesn't just focus on 50, Jay-Z, and Diddy. It pulls in everyone connected to them. And once you start connecting the dots, the web becomes massive. One of the most compelling side stories involves Kanye West. Love him or hate him, Kanye has been one of the few mainstream artists willing to publicly call out the industry's power structures. And the documentary suggests that his public breakdowns weren't just mental health crises. They were reactions to being pushed out, to being silenced, to realizing the system he helped build was turning on him. Archived clips show Kanye ranting about contracts, about ownership, about how artists are modern-day slaves to labels. And while the media framed it as instability, the documentary reframes it as truth. Uncomfortable, unpolished truth. One cultural commentator in the film says, Kanye said what everyone was thinking, but he said it too loud, and the industry made an example out of him. The parallels to 50's journey are striking. Both outspoken, both willing to burn bridges, both vilified for refusing to play the game, and both, the film argues, revealing the same ugly truth. The system doesn't reward honesty, it punishes it. Then there's the Lauryn Hill segment, brief but powerful. The film shows how one of the most talented artists of her generation effectively disappeared from mainstream music after refusing to conform. She spoke out about exploitation, about control, about how the industry chews up Black women and spits them out. And what happened? She was labeled difficult, unstable, unreliable. Her tours were framed as chaotic, her albums were shelved, and her voice was silenced, not through force, through narrative. The documentary argues that this is the industry's favorite weapon. If they can't control you, they'll control your story, and once your story is tainted, you're done. The film also revisits the East Coast versus South narrative from the early 2000s, and this theory is explosive. According to anonymous executives interviewed in the documentary, there was a deliberate industry shift to prioritize Southern artists over East Coast talent. Why? Money. Southern artists were cheaper, easier to control, and the sound was more commercial. Meanwhile, New York artists were demanding ownership, control, respect, and the labels didn't want to deal with that, so they shifted the spotlight. And according to the film, Jay-Z and Diddy were complicit because they benefited from the lack of competition. With fewer rising New York stars, their dominance was secure.
One former A&R executive describes it like this: "They didn't want another 50 Cent. They wanted artists they could manage. And when New York stopped producing manageable talent, they turned to Atlanta, to Houston, to Miami. And Jay and Puff, they didn't fight it. They adapted, because they knew as long as they stayed on top, the shift didn't hurt them. It hurt everyone below them." That statement rewires the entire history of 2000s hip-hop. It suggests that the regional power shift wasn't organic, it was orchestrated, and the architects were the very people fans considered New York loyalists. Fans online have been dissecting this theory for weeks, breaking down album release schedules, radio play statistics, label investments, and the data, as shown in the documentary, supports the claim. East Coast album releases dropped significantly between 2003 and 2008. Meanwhile, Southern artists dominated, and the few New York artists who did break through, many had ties to Jay-Z or Diddy. The gatekeepers stayed in control, even as the landscape shifted. And that's the strategy. Don't resist change, control it, shape it, profit from it. And the documentary argues that's exactly what happened. Another side story focuses on the media's role, how outlets like TMZ, XXL, and even mainstream news shaped public perception of these moguls, how certain stories were pushed while others were buried, how access journalism turned reporters into mouthpieces. One journalist, speaking anonymously, admits, "If you wrote a negative story about Jay-Z or Diddy, you lost access. No more interviews, no more exclusives." So most outlets didn't risk it. And that reveals the ecosystem. The industry doesn't just control artists, it controls the narrative. And 50's documentary is a direct threat to that control, because it's bypassing the gatekeepers, going straight to the people. And the people are listening. What we're seeing here is bigger than hip-hop. It's bigger than 50, Jay-Z, or Diddy. It's about how power functions in every industry, how the few control the many, how silence becomes currency, and how exposure, real exposure, threatens the entire structure. The documentary dedicates an entire segment to this broader conversation, and it's chilling, because once you see the pattern in hip-hop, you start seeing it everywhere. Hollywood, tech, politics, finance, the same playbook. Protect the powerful, silence the accusers, control the narrative. And one sociologist interviewed in the film puts it perfectly. "We live in a system where truth is less valuable than image, and the people who master image control everything." The documentary shows how this applies to Jay-Z specifically. His entire brand is built on the idea of the self-made billionaire, the guy who started with nothing and built an empire. But the film argues that narrative is incomplete. Yes, he's talented. Yes, he's strategic. But he also had help. He also had access. He also benefited from a system that elevated him while suppressing others. And acknowledging that doesn't diminish his success, it contextualizes it. The responsibility conversation is crucial. The film asks, what do we owe the culture that made us? And for 50, the answer is clear. Honesty, transparency, truth. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs relationships, even when you make you a target. Because without that, the culture becomes a commodity, something to be bought and sold, and the people who built it become footnotes. The documentary argues that Jay-Z chose image over accountability, chose wealth over truth, chose power over principle. And that choice, the film suggests, is the real scandal. Not any one allegation, but the cumulative decision to prioritize self-preservation over cultural responsibility. Then there's the warning. The film ends this section with a message to the next generation, to the young artists watching, to the influencers building brands, to anyone who thinks fame is the goal. And the message is simple but haunting. The higher you climb, the more you're watched. And the more you're watched, the less room you have to be real. One young rapper featured briefly talks about the pressure to stay silent, to not speak out against the people in power, because challenging them means losing opportunities, losing cosigns, losing access. And in an industry where access is everything, silence becomes survival. But the documentary flips that narrative. It argues that silence isn't safety, it's complicity. And the only way the system changes is if people refuse to be complicit, if they speak up, if they expose, if they risk everything for truth. And that's what makes 50's documentary so dangerous. It's not just entertainment, it's a call to action, a challenge to the culture, a demand for accountability. And whether the industry likes it or not, the conversation has started, and it's not stopping. Diddy wasn't the end, he was the beginning. That line hits like a hammer, because as the documentary builds towards its conclusion, it becomes clear that this story is far from over. 50 hints repeatedly that there's more coming, more documents, more testimony, more names. And the biggest name still in the crosshairs? Jay-Z. The final segment focuses on what might come next. Sealed court documents that could be unsealed, settlements that were signed with NDAs that might expire, witnesses who were paid to stay silent who might finally speak, and the implications are terrifying for anyone trying to protect their legacy. One legal analyst featured in the film explains how NDAs work, how they can silence people for decades, but also how they can expire, or be challenged, or be overridden if criminal activity is involved. And if even a fraction of the allegations hinted at in this documentary are true, then those NDAs might not hold. The walls are closing in, and Jay-Z's billion-dollar empire might be built on a foundation that's starting to crack. The documentary doesn't make definitive claims, but it plants seeds, and those seeds are growing fast. Speculation is rampant online. Fans are predicting what the sequel will reveal. Some think it'll focus on the Rhymier paternity case. Others think it'll dive deeper into the NFL deal and potential financial corruption. Some believe it'll expose other industry figures who've stayed quiet for too long. And a few think it'll go even darker, into trafficking allegations similar to what brought Diddy down. The documentary doesn't confirm any of this, but it doesn't deny it either. And that ambiguity is intentional. It keeps people talking, keeps people watching, keeps the pressure on. One particularly chilling moment comes when 50 himself appears on screen, standing in front of a wall covered in documents, photos, and timelines. He looks directly at the camera and says, "Truth doesn't have an expiration date. It just waits for someone brave enough to tell it." And then the screen cuts to black. No music, no credits, just silence. And that silence is deafening, because it forces you to sit with the weight of everything you just watched, to process, to question, to decide what you believe.
Reports are already surfacing that Jay-Z's legal team is preparing for a potential defamation case, that his PR team is working overtime to control the narrative, that his allies in the industry are distancing themselves just in case. And whether any of that is true or not, the fact that it's being discussed shows how much this documentary has shifted the conversation. 50 didn't just make a film, he made a cultural moment, a turning point. And whatever happens next, one thing is certain, the story isn't over, not even close. So where does that leave us? With more questions than answers, with a culture demanding accountability, and with 50 Cent standing in the middle of it all, holding a torch that's burning brighter every day. This documentary isn't perfect. It's messy, it's controversial, it's polarizing, but it's also necessary, because for too long, hip-hop's power structure operated in the shadows, and now those shadows are being lit up. Whether you believe every claim or not, one thing is undeniable. This conversation matters. From Diddy's conviction to Jay-Z's carefully protected empire, from the NFL deal to the paternity case that won't die, from the artists who are silenced to the victims who finally spoke up, this documentary forces us to reckon with an uncomfortable truth. Success doesn't always mean virtue, power doesn't always mean respect, and legacy doesn't erase accountability. The culture is changing, and the people who built empires on silence are running out of places to hide. So here's the question. Do you think 50's documentary is exposing the truth, or is it just stirring drama for clicks? Do you think Jay-Z will respond, or will he stay silent like he always does? And do you think there's more coming, or is this the end of the story? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk, because this isn't just about celebrities, it's about all of us, about the stories we believe, about the heroes we choose, and about whether we're willing to question them when the evidence demands it. If you made it this far, you're part of the conversation, and that matters. So make sure you like this video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notifications, because this story is far from over. More revelations are coming, more names are dropping, and we'll be here covering every single twist. I appreciate you rocking with me. Stay safe out there, stay critical, stay curious, and remember, the truth doesn't need permission, it just needs a voice. And right now, that voice is getting louder. Peace.